I Hate the News is the weekly news bulletin from I Hate Politics podcast, a show about a human activity we love to hate. I'm Sunil Dasgupta. It's October 14th, 2025. An 11-year-old on a bike coming home from school dies in a collision with a school bus. We look at how pedestrian safety is seldom preventive. Montgomery County Public Schools is proposing new boundary changes that leave two schools in the richest part of the county untouched while increasing the poverty rate at schools which already have high poverty rates. A county executive candidate forum showcases the debate over affordable housing likely to dominate next year's elections. Stay with us.
I Hate Politics is brought to you by the Political Science Program at UMBC Shady Grove, where you'll learn a strong foundation in public policy, pre-law, and international affairs for an impactful career in a number of essential areas. Learn more at shadygrove.umbc.edu.
What's with you today? What's with today? Gotta tell her I love her.
I Hate Politics is a podcast about our neighborhoods, workplaces, schools and streets, and our local governments as they function in diverse and democratic societies. This means our politics are messy, dirty, sometimes corrupt, with often self serving politicians. But no matter how much we may hate politics, we are never exempt from it, even when we refuse to participate. In fact, the purpose of politics is to keep society functioning, precisely when we don't agree with each other, like now. Music for this episode comes from Dear Daria, a Washington, D.C. power pop indie rock band. Mary Jo Matea on vocals, guitar, and keys. Joshua Hunter on guitar. Eamon Donnelly on bass, and Dan ABH on drums. You can find their music at deardariaband.com.
Damn the man who saved the empire. Damn the man who saved the empire. Damn the man who saved the empire. Damn the man who saved the empire.
11-year-old Summer Lim was riding her bike back from school last week in Rockville, Maryland, when she was killed under a school bus. Summer was a sixth grade student at Earl B. Wood Middle School. Full disclosure, my own kids went to Wood Middle School, and many years ago, I was PTA president there. The circumstances of the collision are under investigation. The Montgomery County Police Department's Collision Reconstruction Unit will file the official report. But historically, in pedestrian and bike death cases, drivers generally have not been held responsible for wrongdoing unless they were driving under the influence. And by implication, the blame shifts to the dead. There is also the belief that road collisions are tragedies with no one to hold responsible. This is absolutely untrue. Road design is not neutral between vehicles and pedestrians and bikers. And driver re education is largely absent in the United States. In Maryland, automobiles need repeated emission testing. Drivers do not have to go back for driver's ed, except under court orders. But every year, most of us go through anti harassment training at work. Commercial driver license holders, which includes school bus drivers, need medical recertification, but not actual driving re education. There is a good case for pedestrian and biker education as well, but they are not the ones operating machines several tons in weight and moving at speed. If anything, the balance of responsibility and education lies with those wielding the killing weapon. But government, including local government, hardly works like that. Walk and bike safety to and from schools lives on the edge of jurisdictions. The school district and the county transportation department. Where Summer Lim died, on the corner of Bower Drive and Russet Road, is not close to her school for road design to be a problem for MCPS. But for MC Dot, the transportation department, Bower and Russet is one intersection in thousands that need to be fixed. And action, if there is any, follows tragedy, even though political leaders talk of prevention. To illustrate the failure of prevention, consider the Glenview community in Silver Spring. The neighborhood is home to Glenview Elementary School, one of the only two MCPS schools that has no assigned school buses. Only students with disabilities get buses, everyone else is supposed to walk to school. But because sidewalks in the neighborhood do not connect and connect to school, many families drive their children to and from school, which on roads without sidewalks increases the dangers for those who walk. No one has died there yet, but the point of prevention is, well, to get things done before something goes wrong. April Jean Domenico is the president of Glenview Neighborhood Association. April, the Montgomery County Department of Transportation, through its Safe Routes to School program, conducted a study of the neighborhood. What did the study say?
Well, the study ended up making some recommendations, primarily to improve some curb ramps and some crosswalk markings, but it really failed to address our neighborhood's concern about the lack of sidewalks on our very busy roads that children walk every day on their way to school.
What roads are these?
A primary concern is Pliers Mill Road. Pliers Mill Road connects Kensington with the Wheaton community. And between Connecticut Avenue and Georgia Avenue, there are sidewalks on both sides of the street, and there are many traffic calming measures along that stretch. However, when it gets to the east side of Georgia Avenue, there are no sidewalks on either side of the street. There are no traffic calming measures, and there are no stop signs for a very long stretch of roadway. So cars speed very frequently down this road. We recently did get one small traffic calming measure, and that they made at Bucknell and Pliers Mill, they made concrete pushouts and bollards to indicate that it was a pedestrian crossing. And they added some crosswalk markings across the street.
What is the speed limit on Pliers Mill, east of Georgia?
Do you believe it's 25 miles per hour? I would have to double check on that. But that is generally the speed limit in our neighborhood.
And lots of kids walk on Pliers Mill to go to school and come back?
Well, that's the thing. MCPS requires that they would walk. There's no bus service. However, parents do not feel safe letting their children walk along Pliers Mill without any sidewalks and these speeding cars that have low visibility. There's a change in elevation that prohibits oncoming cars to see pedestrians at certain key points along this road. So the parents in these areas end up having to drive their children to school. And I think it's really evident of just how unsafe parents feel walking their children to school. If you look at the pickup and the drop-off line, I think it's really not appropriate to call our school a 100% walking school when really you're just forcing parents to drive because it doesn't feel safe.
Are there other streets that you're concerned about?
There's another major connecting road called Republic Road that ends up connecting Glen Haven Drive with Huntley Place, which is an unofficial drop-off point for the school as well. There's a cul-de-sac that people use to bypass the very lengthy drop-off line in the morning and the very lengthy pickup line in the morning. There's no sidewalk on either side of that street, and it feels very dangerous to walk a kid down that street, to push a stroller down that street, to walk your dog down that street.
Study was done by a private consulting company called Tool Design. Did they consult with the community before they did their work?
They did conduct a survey of Glen Haven Elementary School parents. That was in the winter of 2023 until 2024, just the early months of 2024 is when they were accepting those survey results.
And those survey results did not include concerns about Pliers Mill and Republic Road?
Oh, they definitely did include those concerns. Those were addressed in the preliminary study, but weren't addressed in the recommendations at the end of the study.
What do the recommendations say?
The recommendations primarily seem to concern themselves with crosswalk markings and curb ramps. Those consisted of 15 pages of the report, whereas the sidewalk construction recommendations and bike recommendations and signage recommendations only comprised about 3 pages of the report. They didn't sufficiently look at the network of the community. So there are a number of sidewalk locations that end in people's yards. They don't extend to the street. And so on paper, it looks like, oh, this street has a sidewalk. But if you actually walk on it, you can't use it if you're pushing a stroller.
One of the challenges of building sidewalks is to convince homeowners to accept them in front of their homes.
You got it.
And there are pitch battles in many a neighborhood over this. Where is the Glen Haven community on accepting sidewalks in front of their homes?
I don't want to speak on behalf of everyone in my neighborhood, but I have spoken with some of those neighbors who have sidewalks end in the middle of their yard, and they have no problem extending it to the end of the intersection. Everyone that I have spoken with that has young children would welcome sidewalks, even if they're in their front yard. I have yet to run across any vehement opposition to sidewalks that I have heard people had in other neighborhoods.
April Jan Domenico, thank you.
Thank you very much.
We have been focusing on magnet program reorganization proposals from MCPS, but the school district is also in the middle of boundary changes due to the opening of a new high school, Woodward, and the ongoing expansion of Northwood High School. Michelle Schefter is an Einstein High School parent, which is affected by these changes, and she took a closer look at the boundary options being proposed by the school district.
The first thing that I noticed when I looked at the comparison of utilization rates as I was trying to compare the differences between the different options, not just for my school, but looking at all of the different high schools, including Blair, Einstein, Walter Johnson, Kennedy, Northwood, Wheaton, BCC, and Whitman, and then, of course, the new Woodward School, is I noticed that 2 of the schools, their utilization numbers were identical in all 4 of this latest round of options. And those 2 schools are BCC and Whitman.
BCC stands for Bethesda Chevy Chase High School. What are the rates? What are the differences that you are seeing?
The Whitman utilization, which is currently at 90.4%. And the utilization is basically, it's a capacity usage percentage. So it looks at the total number of students that the school has capacity for, and it compares that to the enrollment number. So it's whether it's over enrolled or under enrolled for what the school's capacity is. And that impacts classrooms, whether they need to have portables, what size their gym can hold, those sorts of things. And a big reason for why, just for a little background, the whole reason why we're doing this is that there are a lot of schools that are over capacity at this point in time. And that's why we are reopening Woodward right now, so that we could relieve the capacity pressures in what's often referred to as down county. And that's that broad list of schools that I mentioned. So the thing that I noticed is that the utilization currently versus the projected in 2030 to 2031 for Whitman is almost identical. Currently, it's 90.4% utilization, and projected for all four of the options are 89.8%, which said to me those are probably identical boundaries. Similarly, for BCC, the current utilization is 92.3%. And in all four of the options for this latest round that they just announced, it's 97.5%, which says to me that there's no real difference in the options presented. And the lines being drawn are going to be the same in all four options. Unlike that are all of the other schools. And for the other schools, there's a variety of different numbers in each of the options. The worst one is probably Kennedy. Their current utilization is just under 81%. And in all four of the options, it is over 100%. Option D has it just at 100%, but options A, B, and C have it at 107.6%. So here you have a school that is going from being well within its utilization to being almost 10% overutilization. And if the whole purpose of this study is to get all of the schools to be within, within utilization, we're opening a brand new school. Why is it that there's one school that will actually be in all of the situations beyond their utilization, especially considering that Woodward, which is the brand new school, in the four options presented, one of them is 74.7% utilization, one of them is 80.8%. The highest utilization for this brand new school that we're opening up is 85%.
Could MCPS turn around and say the boundaries can be shifting and the utilization can remain the same? Is that a possibility?
That is, and that is one part of the data that I have not had a chance to look at yet, which is, are the maps different? There's absolutely differences in the maps with the first round of options, and you can see that actually in the percentages for utilization for the first set of options. So looking at BCC, for instance, the options for the first round that was, I think, in March or May, ranged from 85% utilization to 100.8% utilization. So there definitely were map differences a few months ago when they came out with this first set of options. The same things for Whitman. So those ranged from 89% to 98%. So that's a 10% difference. That sort of said to me this round, or this time around, there probably is little to no difference in the map boundaries for those two schools.
Is it your contention that MCPS went from a set of proposals that would have more equitably redistributed students in this boundary change to a set of proposals where they are essentially sitting out two of the schools well known for their low poverty rates?
It's hard not to draw that conclusion. The lowest farms rate for all of these schools impacted is Whitman, and it's 6.2% farms rate. 6% of their students qualify for free and reduced meals, 94% do not. BCC actually is much more diverse. 22.5% of their students qualify for free and reduced meals. Almost a quarter of their students, or somewhere between, a fifth and a quarter of their students, qualify for free and reduced meals. The highest farms rates for these schools are at Wheaton, 59%. And with the different options in three of the options, it bumps that up to 61.7%. And at Kennedy, which again is the school that goes from 80% utilization up to 107% utilization in some of the scenarios, current farms rate is 50%. So half of their students qualify for free and reduced meals. And in each of the four options, it is not much of a meaningful drop. The other thing that I looked at that I think is equally as telling is what's the budget of the PTA of the different schools. Because farms rate tells you generally the population of the school, how many students are coming from families that have lower socioeconomic status, but it doesn't really give you the full picture of the rest of the student body, how much additional resources are available to that school beyond their standard school budget. The PTA budget tells an even more interesting story. One thing that's really interesting that I learned is that some of the schools that have access to more resources not only have a PTA, but they've actually created educational foundations. It's an actual foundation that the money gets contributed to that operates different from a PTA. Both BCC and Whitman have educational foundations. BCC's educational foundation budget is $237,000 a year. So even though their farms rate is, reasonable at 22.5%, if you compare that to Kennedy, their PTSA budget is less than $10,000.
Michelle Schefter, thanks for doing all this work.
Thank you for taking the time to talk through this with me. I really appreciate it.
Also last week, the local nonprofit Montgomery County Renters Alliance organized a county executive candidate forum. With Evan Glass calling in sick, only council members Will Joando and Andrew Friedson ended up on the stage, so it was a change to hear an actual debate. We'll start with the elephant in the room, rent stabilization, and first up, Andrew Friedson.
When we talk about the issue of why renters don't have the level of power that they should, it's fundamentally because landlords control a scarce resource, a desperately needed scarce resource, and we don't have enough housing. So any policy that we put in place that is going to reduce the amount of housing that we have and fail to meet the needs that we have in housing is not going to solve the problem. It's going to worsen the problem. And unfortunately, that's what rent stabilization has done. If you look at the last 15-month period, multifamily rental housing has screeched to a halt. And there are some who say, well, that's only because of the economy, or that's only because of construction costs or tariffs. And that's just not true. Because if you look at other regional counterparts that we have in Northern Virginia and in DC, they don't face the same challenges that we have. There are a number of provisions in the rent stabilization law that are particularly concerning, that have caused major challenges with the willingness of housing providers to invest in building more housing. One is the 23-year exemption that you heard instead of a date certain period, which is very difficult to finance a property. Very difficult. That's just the reality of it. These aren't local developers making choices. These are institutional investors like state pension funds for teachers and other institutional investors that are choosing where to invest their money. They're not choosing even between one property or another property in our region or our community. They're choosing between investments all around the country. That's number one. Number two, on the vacancy control dynamic, that is a protection of a unit as opposed to a protection of a person. And that causes serious issues, particularly for naturally occurring affordable housing. We see what happens when we go too far on policies like this. It prevents progress that we need to build more housing. It also makes multifamily rental housing happen with greater irregularity, and it moves those multifamily properties, those rental properties, into for sale product. And that's what we're seeing. Luxury townhomes at well over $1 million, $1.5 million, are replacing what would have been and could have been multifamily housing.
Now, Will Joando.
Everyone in the transaction, whether it's BlackRock, the pension fund, you're talking about billionaires and millionaires who are investing and saying, I need 20% return to build something and charge you $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $7,000 a month for a studio one bed. The system we have is completely broken. It's an absolute joke that rent stabilization is getting in the way of those exorbitant profits. We have to change the whole conversation. I met with a mom who was living in a one-bedroom with a 13-year-old son in Briggs Cheney because they had to move from her two-bedroom in the same complex because a $50 rent increase was going to kick them out of that apartment. And she didn't want him to have to move schools because he was doing well. You're balancing that, and that's a good story. She was able to stay in the apartment even though they're sleeping in the same bed as a 13-year-old, which I know my 13-year-old wouldn't want to do, against someone making crazy profits. And the idea that you have to choose between both is not true. We have a project in White Oak that's going to have 5,000 new units, 9,000 jobs, and they're going to be under rent stabilization. And when asked in the Washington Business Journal, that developer, why are you still doing this? He said, because we think it's profitable, we can do well even in this environment. We need to get new people into it, and that's what happens. They try to punish you in the short term to say, we're going to do a capital strike, and in the short term, and then 3 quarters, and then come back and say, see, look, no one's building anything. But when you look over the long term, and studies confirm this, people come back into the market and you get new developers into the market.
And back to Andrew Friedson.
In the process of creating a different system, we are not building housing right now. That is not happening in Montgomery County. The only housing that is being built is subsidized by the government. And I am all for subsidizing affordable housing. Nobody has done more on affordable housing programs and funding programs to accelerate the amount of affordable housing than I have over the last 7 years on the council. And Councilmember Jawando and I have worked together on many of these efforts. In fact, 2 of the 3 items that he mentioned I voted in favor of, and he supported some of the things that I'm going to talk about. There isn't a lot of disagreement on that, but there is a fundamental disagreement here.
And Jawando, again, with the benefits of rent stabilization.
There's a 23-year exemption for new construction. That means your rent can be raised any amount for 23 years. If you don't raise it to the full 6%, if you do 3%, the next year you can bank that other 3% and add it on to the 6%. That's a big raise. Our Department of Housing and Community Affairs considers 10% to be constructive eviction, the same as evicting somebody, a 10% increase in 1 year. The average rent increase in Montgomery County over the last 30 years, 2 to 3%. So the idea that this is impacting profitability, not true at all. Is it impacting people's wanting to charge more than that? Absolutely, but not profitability. One of the things I'm most proud of, we saw almost a 70% reduction in houses and rental units that were on the troubled properties list. That means they're not habitable. They have serious problems like roaches and mice and mold over and over again. In 1 year, we saw a 70% decrease. The reason is because we tied rent increases to, if you're on that list, you can't increase rent. And people, what they did is they hired people to come in and fix things and improve the habitability for thousands of residents. It's one of the many things why this law is working. It's not perfect, it was a compromise, but it absolutely can exist. To your last point, we need to produce more housing. I'm a big proponent. You can produce housing, you can preserve existing affordable housing, and you can protect renters. And you can do all 3 at the same time. Don't buy into the false choice that you have to do one or the other. You can do both. People can make a profit, and you can keep people safe and housed. And that's what we're going to do as county executive.
The forum also attracted controversy surrounding the participation of other less known candidates in the county executive race. And Renters Alliance, which is a nonprofit, now faces a lawsuit alleging violation of its 501c3 status, which prohibits picking and choosing who they invite to candidate forums. Renters Alliance claims that they set a fundraising threshold for candidates to be invited. We will be following the lawsuit as it proceeds. Stay tuned.
Stella's a strange and special girl, oblivious in her own world, a ray of sunshine each new day. She likes to hang around the house, sleep through the whole day on the couch, doesn't do.
That's all for this episode. Be sure to check out our feature interview series that come out Friday mornings. I Hate Politics is produced by me, Sunil Dasgupta, with support from the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. I direct UMBC's political science program at the universities at Shady Grove in Montgomery County, where, among other things, we explore and learn about politics, government, and society close to home. Music for this episode comes from Dear Daria, a Washington, D.C. power pop indie rock band. Mary Jo Matea on vocals, guitar, and keys. Joshua Hunter on guitar. Eamon Donnelly on bass. And Dan ABH on drums. You can find their music at deardariaband.com. If you want to share your music on the show or know someone else who might want to, please email us at producer@ihppod.org. I hope you'll subscribe and share the podcast as we bring you stories about politics close to you and to your home. See you next time.